We got a new NHL CBA over the weekend, and the big winners of it? That's right, it's NHL Seattle. Real quick though, if at any point you do find yourself enjoying this video and you happen to like enjoying things, then I think the subscribe button is probably for you. Now, to be perfectly honest, really the big winners of this NHL CBA is pretty much anybody that's a fan of hockey, because it does mean that we're not going to have to see or have to worry about a lockout coming in the near future. And it might be a sign that there's actually finally some good communication between the players and owners, and things could actually be a lot better than they have been over the last 2 decades. Outside of that though, the big win specifically for the players, and honestly all fans of hockey, is that we will get to see them have a chance to play in the Olympics in 2022, if there is one, and 2026. Meanwhile, for the owners, they'll get a little bit of financial relief for any money they might have lost during this pandemic or might continue to lose in the following seasons as we try to recover from it. That coming in the form of some reduced payments for the games that were missed in this last year, as well as some deferred payments and increase in escrow payments for the players in the next year and maybe even a couple more years to come after that. But the big win for NHL Seattle is the fact that the salary cap is not going to be increasing next year, and honestly probably isn't going to be increasing the year after that either. But why would next year's salary cap even matter? And wouldn't you want a bigger salary cap the year after that so you could sign some more talent for the first year of the team? Well, the reason that this is all good news is because of the expansion draft. Also, I do want to mention before we get too deep into this that a lot of the detailed information I got for this video came from the guys at NHL Seattle and some articles that they put together on this very same idea. So if you somehow found me and haven't heard of them yet, or you just haven't checked out their stuff, I do recommend you go do that, as they have some pretty good info that they've put out, especially on this subject and pretty much anything that's hockey in the area of Seattle. And I will leave some links to their articles on this subject down in the description below. At this point, it's a pretty well-known fact that Vegas managed to make a number of pretty good trades leading up to their expansion draft to get some young players that weren't going to be available for them to select. And by doing that, by taking advantage of some teams that were going to be in cap trouble and promising to select players from those teams that had some larger cap hits that weren't going to give them any returns. With the 2 obvious examples being them getting Shane Theodore from Anaheim in exchange for promising to select Clayton Stoner, as well as getting William Karlsson from Columbus in order to select David Clarkson. And while sure, they did take on almost $9 million in salary between Clarkson and Stoner, neither of whom ever saw the ice for the team, I would say they probably got their money's worth out of Theodore and Karlsson, both of whom still remain key contributors on the team 3 years later, with Theodore having 112 points in 211 games played and averaging almost 21 minutes per game, while Karlsson has 180 points in 227 games with nearly 19 minutes per game. Now, up until this point at least, it seems like the prevailing opinion has been that the other 30 franchises have learned their lesson with Vegas and aren't going to let Seattle get away with the same kind of shenanigans, meaning that there probably just wouldn't be as many trades, or at least if there were, teams would be a lot more cautious in dealing with Seattle leading up to their expansion draft coming up in a year. But again, that was all back when we thought that the salary cap was going to continue to increase year after year, with some projections anywhere from $84 to $88 million this next year, or at least by Seattle's first season in the league. But now with the salary cap stuck at $81.5 million this next season, there is a very small chance that we're going to make it to $88 million, and it's only going to increase from that $81.5 million if there is enough revenue for the salary cap to increase. And really the only way there's going to be enough revenue in this next season in order for the salary cap to have any kind of significant increase by the 2021-22 season is if there's going to be fans in the stands for this next year. And honestly, even with the season not starting until December, I just don't see any way that especially some areas in the US are going to be able to have fans in the stands for that season. Even at that though, that's still before you consider the fact that with next season, again starting in December, there's a decent chance that they don't even play the full 82 games in order to set up for the regular start the season after that. And even that is without another COVID interruption. So as far as I can see anyway, there's a very good chance that by the 2021-22 season, the salary cap is still sitting at $81.5 million, or maybe they can get it up to $82 million. Either way, it's a long ways away from the $88 million that most teams were expecting when they were signing contracts. And with teams like Toronto, Arizona, St. Louis, Dallas, and Vancouver already up against the salary cap this year, there are definitely going to be a number of teams that might be looking to cut some deals in order to get a little bit of relief next season, gearing up for the expansion draft in the summer of next year. Now sure, even with a huge unexpected increase in cap-strapped teams looking to maybe make some deals, they probably still will be a little bit wary about trading young talent like the teams did with Theodore and Karlsson. I mean, for that matter, we're already seeing some teams make some business decisions with their young players to make sure that they aren't draft eligible. But even where teams might be hesitant or not willing to trade their young prospects, there is still draft capital to trade for. Which is definitely something that Vegas was able to take advantage of as well, because while they did get 6 players from trades before their expansion draft, 4 of whom ended up staying, they also netted 12 draft picks during those pre-draft trades, including 2 first-round picks in their first year and 4 second-round picks that were spread over the first 4 years. And while sure, trading for more draft picks rather than already developed talent is a little bit more of a guessing game and probably means that there will be less immediate success for the team, it still does mean a pretty good option for their long-term success. Now, of course, there's always the potential that teams stay strong to being stubborn and a little bit stingy when trying to do deals with Seattle before their expansion draft, and maybe there's just some GMs who had their feelings hurt with just how badly they got fleeced by Vegas and aren't willing. But even in a world where Seattle just can't find any trade partners, that still means that there's going to be a large number of teams that are going to have some salary cap issues and going to be stuck with some long contracts, meaning that they'll have some pretty tough decisions when it comes to who they're going to have to leave exposed to the Seattle expansion draft. And Seattle will have some pretty good players to select from in that scenario. Now, obviously, with the expansion draft still a year away, a lot of this is still very hypothetical, and as Ron Francis has pointed out, they still haven't really heard any details from the league on any potential changes to the expansion draft rules, or really what's going on with that, as the league has had their hands pretty full over the last few months. So far as we know to this point, the expansion draft rules for Seattle still remain the same as they were for Vegas, like was originally stated. And really, the only rule that might have to change would be the games played rule over the last 2 years or the last season leading up to the expansion draft. Those rules being that any player that plays at least 40 games in this upcoming season or has played 70 games between this upcoming season and this last season has to be either protected or made available for Seattle to draft. So assuming, and to me it seems like quite a bit of an assumption, that we'll get an 82 game season this next year, the 40 games in the next season still remains the same, so the only change that would have to happen would be to whether or not it stays at 70 games over the last 2 years, or if they reduce it after having missed about 15% of last season. And to me, that's a pretty simple and easy change for them to make, so I really don't see why they wouldn't do it, but they probably still will wait to see whether or not we can get a full 82 games out of this next year. And if we do get a full 82 games, with us having missed, again, about 15% of this last season, we would have missed out on about 7.5% of the games between those 2 seasons for that 70 game requirement. So it would be pretty easy to just take that chunk out of it, which amounts to about 5 games. Meaning that the requirement could go down to just 65 games over the last 2 years and then stick with that 40 games over the one season, again, assuming the 82 year for this next season. Really then, outside of a lack of a reduction in the games played rules around which players have to get exposed, the only thing that could really stand in Seattle's way from benefiting from this whole thing would be if the NHL decided to do some sort of relief for teams that do end up in a little bit of a cap hell. And the way they could do this would be by allowing NHL teams to cut players without having to worry about taking the cap hit for their remaining salaries. But honestly, I don't think that it's super likely that the NHL would do this. They've never done it in the past, and with an expansion draft coming up, there's no real reason that they would need to do it this time. Especially considering that they've made it pretty clear that they want the expansion teams like Vegas was, and they hope Seattle can be, to be at least competitive coming into the league so that they can grow those fan bases in those areas right out of the gate. Something, again, they were obviously very successful in doing in Vegas and definitely hope to be successful in Seattle. So really for us, all there is left to do is to sit back, continue to do our mock drafts, and hope that the 2021-22 season isn't affected in any way by what's going on now. And I suppose since we're already talking about NHL Seattle, it's probably also worth mentioning that in the last few days there's been a rumor going around from a potentially very reliable source that has a bit of a reputation for breaking news like this early, that one of the main colors and the main color for the NHL Seattle team is going to be a dark blue. Maybe somewhat similar to what Vancouver has, but they assured us that the rest of the color scheme will look different, which does probably mean that green isn't going to be a main contributor to the color scheme, which personally I find to be pretty disappointing. But honestly, as long as it's not black and red, which this would suggest it's not, I'm okay with it. It seems like then the most likely scenario, if this is true, is that the color scheme would be something along the lines of dark blue and that teal, as well as the salmon colors that we have seen on their website already, which means they could end up looking a little bit like Racing Point from Formula 1. I mean, okay, sure, that's more pink than salmon, but honestly, what do you expect people to see when they look at salmon other than just a slightly orange pink? But it does mean that, at least as far as the main color is concerned, they would match up pretty well with the Seahawks and Mariners, which I guess, depending on your point of view, is either a good thing or not a good thing. And as far as the ever-important name discussion goes, if this is actually the main color, it does probably mean that emeralds and evergreens are pretty much out, but it also means that anything that's a fish or maybe a kraken is still very much in play. And keep in mind, it's also probably safe to say that totems has been eliminated by everything else that's going on with all the other Native American-based names around the country. But that is all I have for now, so as always, if you made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like this video, do hit that like button down below. If you really liked it and maybe even enjoyed it, that subscribe button can help you down there if you haven't hit it already. Also, as everything in this video is completely speculation, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments section below. Otherwise, I hope to see you next time. Stay safe out there and be good to each other. Peace!